Mines littered the countryside, and poverty gripped the nation. A quieter war had begun to rage. It was a war fueled by desperation, a war against Angkor's ancient carvings.
When I was a child, this place was full of beautiful sculpture with arm, leg, head, and torso. When I first came back to Cambodia, it all disappeared. There's one or two left, but it's all damaged. And that, to me, that's like somebody ripped my heart out and throw it away.
A people driven by starvation began to steal pieces of their past.
After the war, a piece of stone is traded for a bowl of rice because people were hungry.
Desperate Cambodians began to cannibalize their own culture, while Vietnamese soldiers joined in the pillaging. Cambodia's temples were being ravaged, while its sacred stones crumbled from neglect. But there was no one left to protect them. Of the temple's 1,200 trained professionals, it is said the Khmer Rouge wiped out all but a few. Today, the race is on to train a new generation of caretakers. At the 12th century temple Preah Khan, the World Monuments Fund established a project 5 years ago under the guidance of conservation architect John Sanday.
It's amazing to think that nearly all the people who had any qualifications, had any knowledge of architecture or engineering, were wiped out by the Khmer Rouge. Our main purpose for being here really is to train up young Khmers now, both professionals and also these great old craftsmen who were working before the Khmer Rouge were here. It's a very important part of our mission to train young Cambodians because they, after all, are the future of this country.
Like Ronnie Yimsut, this new generation is piecing together their lives while piecing together their crumbling temples.
It's dead now, and I'm terrified it's going to come crashing down on the building, and I don't know how we should go about removing it.
It will come down, that's a guarantee. Question is when it come down.
After years of training in the States, Yimsut now works for the U.S. Forest Service. But he returns each year to Angkor as a volunteer to share his new skills with his homeland.
The operation of removing a tree from a temple like this is very delicate. One wrong move, the whole thing could come down.
A 200-year-old tree, once dead, has the power to rip apart 800 years of history. With minimal damage to the stones, the team has won another round with nature. But despite the victories of the day, when the workers leave at night, a stillness falls over Angkor, and a more insidious battle begins. Looting had become so rampant at Angkor that 3 years ago a special police force was installed. 500 guards now patrol the main temples 24 hours a day. Their orders are shoot to kill. Looters and police have lost their lives in the ongoing battle. But the real enemy in this war is far from Angkor.
Don't blame the Cambodian for looting. They're just part of the cycle. Blame the buyer in Thailand, in Europe, in America, and in Asia.
When morning comes to Cambodia's temples, there's no telling what took place under cover of darkness the night before. Angkor's police have managed to halt the looting at 42 of the main temples, but over 200 others lie unguarded in Cambodia's vast jungle beyond. From above, the temple Preah Khan looks much as it did 30 years ago, but from below, it offers quite a different view. Over the past decade, most of its magnificent carvings have been hacked away, never again to be seen.
This is very much how I found it when I first arrived. Deep in the jungle. This is the principal entrance through the main enclosure walls here. Over here we have a very fine statue which was intact when I first came. Had a wonderful head on it. These must have been magnificent in their heyday. Now you can see that nearly all the heads have disappeared. There were photographs that we had of the early 60s which showed them in, most of them were still in existence, but sadly since then they've all disappeared.
The intricate detail of Angkor's carvings offers the only written history of the ancient Khmer. But since most of the freestanding statues have been beheaded, the temple walls have now become targets themselves.
Here's another example of a typical looting crime here in Angkor. It's a real tragedy that such priceless pieces are just wantonly really destroyed, because 9 times out of 10 this head would have been broken in half anyway and be worthless.
Steel spikes and armed guards now protect most of Angkor's remaining sculptures. The Conservation d'Angkor was built as a workshop by the French at the turn of the century. Today, the old depot has taken on a morgue-like atmosphere. Within its walls sit the wounded and dismembered. Decapitated bodies lie like mutilated prisoners of war. Conservation d'Angkor holds some of the world's most precious works of art. The most valuable pieces were placed in concrete slabs to protect them through the war. But even these have not escaped assault. This magnificent Hindu god, Shiva, has not been spared the scars of greed. 5 years ago, Cambodia made a desperate plea to the world. With international support, a book was published containing photographs of 100 missing sculptures. The Shiva head stares out helplessly, like the photo from a book of missing persons. It is a piece which would travel halfway around the globe and shock the world when it finally resurfaced. The war to stop the pillaging of Cambodia's temples continues to rage. Fueled by a voracious international market, the battle is blazing out of control. Like vultures in the night, shadowy figures continue to prey on the ancient temples of the Khmer. Looted carvings smuggled from Cambodia are worth thousands of dollars at the end of the trail. So high are the stakes, Cambodian soldiers have joined in the looting. In January, a military truck was apprehended as it sped towards Thailand. It contained 10 tons of stolen carvings. But most thieves are never caught. Artifacts flow across Thailand's border like water. Once across, they're bound for Bangkok, a city throbbing with trade, drugs, sex, and stolen antiquities. John Sande knows the international market is hungry for ancient Khmer art.
Whenever my travels take me through to Bangkok, I go down to the antique shops to see if I can locate anything that might be from Prakan, and it always upsets me to see these pieces.
In Thailand, the sale of ancient Cambodian art is legal, unless it's proven without a doubt it was stolen. Dealers may or may not know whether a piece was looted.
This is just arrival about 2 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah, this is from Angkor.
This Vishnu no Shiva, 3 eye here. 1 more eye here. It's perfect.
And how much would a piece like this go for?
This one high period, this one about 9th century. You see something like this about 90,000, but about 3,600 US dollar.
It's surprising that the people that eventually buy these pieces of art don't realize what they're doing, because every single piece of art that comes from a temple is basically a stolen object. I mean, they were built for the glory of the gods, and the encouragement is from people who actually are buying the stuff. You can get these out of the country?
Everything can ship for you.
You can ship for it?
Yeah, sure. Can show you document.
What about, is there any problems with customs?
America, every country can send.
Out of Bangkok's Great Harbor pass thousands of tons of cargo each day. Amongst it, stone carvings from an ancient empire. Khmer antiquities are shipped to some of the greatest cities in the world. In major art hubs like New York, Cambodian sculptures often surface at top galleries and auction houses. Ancient Khmer art has been bought and sold at auctions much like this one. But as a result of growing international awareness, a year ago, Sotheby's London took 2 carvings off the block when it was suspected they were pieces stolen from Angkor. Cambodia's plea for the return of their looted antiquities prompted the discovery of another missing item, a piece which had mysteriously disappeared 20 years ago from the Conservation d'Angkor, the magnificent head of the Shiva. To everyone's shock, for the past 12 years, the Shiva head has resided in a most surprising place. The Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Curator Martin Lerner was confronted with a dilemma.
The sculpture was donated to the Metropolitan Museum in 1985. In 1993, UNESCO published a book, and much to my horror, the head was illustrated there. As soon as we found out that there was a possibility that this sculpture was the one published as stolen, we immediately contacted UNESCO.
Three years after it surfaced, a 1,000-year-old sandstone carving at last began the 8,000-mile journey back to its homeland. On a sweltering March day in 1997, the ancient head arrived in Phnom Penh. Its odyssey was over. The Shiva's repatriation marks a turning point in international trade. Sotheby's has announced it will no longer place Khmer art in its London auction house. But how many pieces remain in museums, private collections, and other auction houses throughout the world? As pressure builds, more pieces are finding their way home, battered and broken from the war of looting. 13 carvings were recently returned by the Thai government. Though only a small gesture, it symbolizes new hope for Angkor. Like doctors in an operating room, a new generation of Khmer is restoring the ancient pieces of their past. These prisoners of war are home at last.
Graduation, a time of triumph for them all. They reached for a dream, and after years of struggle, they find it within their grasp. For one graduate, the dream is all the more powerful because it comes after the nightmare.
My family was brought to the site of the execution along with 4 other families.
This is Yimsut Ranakshit, known to his classmates as Ronnie. His nightmare began some 10 years ago.
This is a CBS News special. What's happened to Cambodia? A look at a country turned inside out.
We first saw Ronnie as a teenager in a 1978 documentary about the killing fields of Cambodia. The communists, the Khmer Rouge, were determined to eliminate the entire middle class, millions of people. At a refugee camp in Thailand, Ronnie told a translator that he was the only survivor of a Khmer Rouge massacre of 78 people. Many families, including his own brothers and sisters.
The Khmer Rouge tied only men, including an old man. The women were not tied, and men were beaten to death first.
One of Ronnie's relatives, living in the United States, saw this documentary and managed to make contact with him through a CBS News producer. Eventually, Ronnie found his way to the United States, and he found new friends, Cambodian and American. The boy who once needed a translator can now tell his own story of the night of horror on a canal bank in Cambodia.
A lot of them, a lot of soldiers are behind you. More people here, they aim ready to shoot. Anyone run, they're going to shoot. People kidnap, and then they just go bang, bang, bang. Before they get to me, at least 5 people have been hit. A young kid, a small boy, about 3 or 4 years old, he started getting up and crying, "Mommy, mommy," of course. And they go bang. I could see his brain pop. I mean, it's just flash on me, blood and everything. The next thing I know, I was hit my head and my back. I just was out. Painful. The pain came. I was out.
When he came to in the middle of the night, he was surrounded by the bodies of the dead, members of his own family, one right next to him.
But I could see the feet sticking in front of my eyes like this, and people here was kind of blurry. The only thing sticking out was the bare feet of someone. It turned out to be my sister-in-law, who was 9 months pregnant, sitting next to me. And she was there, laying dead. Then, while I was kind of looking around, collecting myself, where I was, finally I recognized, oh my gosh, we are being killed.
He was just able to crawl away as more Khmer Rouge soldiers began to arrive.
Little by little, inching my way like a snail out. I mean, the sound is coming closer and closer. I just hide in a bush next to that. And I passed out again. I was 15 feet away and passed out.
The boy survived and made his way to a refugee camp in Thailand. His parents, and as far as he knew, all of his family were dead. He remembers when a CBS News crew talked to him. He remembers a producer named Brian Ellis.
So we came back to the camp, and Brian writes a note and gave him a business card. He bought a new pants, new shirt, 2 balls, 1 soccer ball and 1 volleyball, and a whole bunch of books, English.
He gave to you?
Yes, he gave me, which is the greatest gift I ever got. I mean, my parents couldn't do better than that.
Well, this is long time. Cyclist, all right.
Me too. Looking forward to it.
Me too.
Very excited about it.
Oh,
I'm glad you made it.
10 years later, Brian Ellis was astonished to find himself invited to the graduation of Ronnie Yimsut from the University of Oregon.
Remember this? What we do, but...
I remember a lot about that time, believe you me.
I couldn't read that, but now I can.
The boy who crawled away from the Khmer Rouge had found his way through years of exile and struggle. And now he had asked the man who gave him the books to see what he had started in motion.
Congratulations to you. Congratulations, dear Ronnie. Congratulations to you.
The boy who almost died in Cambodia is now a young man living in Eugene, Oregon, married to a Cambodian girl named Tavi.
Who doesn't have one?
Who doesn't have one?
The boy, orphaned and lost, has adopted his own new family, and they were all there for the graduation.
I thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. I thank for all the help that you gave me the past 5 or 6 years I've been here and knowing you. Most of them were like 10 years or more. It has been a long, hard road for me, and for a lot of people, I guess. We came out with pretty good, I think. I know we don't want any more long speech. That's to our health. Thank you all for coming.
Ronnie's degree is in landscape architecture. After graduation, he will be working for the National Forest Service. He's already designed special access positions in the woods for the handicapped.
A new fence is going to be put in, a railing, a wood railing with steel that curve in a way that a wheelchair could pull in and overlook over the fence and to the fall and to the canyon.
Ronnie wanted the bookman, Brian Ellis, to see what kind of work he would be doing. Wanted him to see just how far he had come from that refugee camp in Thailand.
It's a long way between here and the camp, and I never thought of that I'd be doing something like this. Just couldn't believe it. I'd be here now and doing this kind of thing. This is for real. It's a project.
You believe it now? You believe it?
I don't know.
Sometimes you started to pinch yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still, this is kind of a dream, a little more pleasant dream, but still feel like a dream.
Ronnie Yimsut.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you.
Do I get a hug?
Man, anytime.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm proud of myself, too.
Beautiful.
The boy, once orphaned and lost, stands now with his American family for the graduation photos.
Look normal.
It is a time of triumph for them all.
Big smile. Big smile. Ready? Hurry, learn, hurry, quick. Quay move again.
Once upon a pre-war time, Phnom Penh, the capital of the Kingdom of Cambodia, was a very special and peaceful place. This is the way it looked. This is the way Phnom Penh, the capital of Kampuchea, looks today. An empty city, a ghost town, depopulated by design as part of a total revolution. This is where the people of Kampuchea are in the spring of 1978, sent to the countryside, to live in communes, to build a society the likes of which have not been seen before, any place in modern times. This ultimate revolution has its advocates.
Well, we saw thousands and thousands of people working, very voluntarily, very joyously, very glad to have a chance to participate in building up a new society.
The revolution also has many victims. This one is very young. He lives in a refugee camp in Thailand, having escaped death and Cambodia. Through tears, he told us how his mother and father, a sister, and 4 brothers were killed, beaten to death by soldiers with clubs and hoes. What follows in this hour, as best we can tell, is what's happened to Cambodia.
This is a CBS News special. What's happened to Cambodia? A look at a country turned inside out. Its life has changed. Its name has changed. The reporter for this hour will be CBS News correspondent Ed Bradley.
You don't have to have a computer to know that rates on homeowners insurance have gone up. Part of it's inflation, but a lot of it is caused by carelessness. Look around. Are you paying for careless neighbors? You know the time.